Welcome to The Criminologist, the podcast dedicated to educating and entertaining our listeners. We bring you subject matter experts from around the world and share the latest and greatest evidence-based practices and interventions to help individuals desist from a life of crime and delinquency. This podcast avoids stereotypes and biases in favor of the lived experiences of those we can best learn from. Now, please welcome the host of The Criminologist, Joseph Arvidsson.
Hello, and welcome to episode 164 of The Criminologist Podcast. Happy to have you all with us today. This week, I am super excited to be teaming up with another APPA connection. APPA, of course, being the American Probation and Parole Association. We are going to be chatting with Dr. Rafael Ventura, who is currently a case manager and program and service coordinator for Los Angeles County Probation. Dr. Ventura has a broad base of experience working with multiple populations and settings. Having worked the full spectrum of youth, adult, and older adult populations, he also has experience working with ethnically diverse populations and extensive knowledge working with mentally ill, homeless, chemical dependency, victims of domestic violence, developmentally and physically disabled individuals, all of whom are navigating our criminal justice system. As you are all about to hear, I actually had a chance to meet Rafael recently during a trip to Los Angeles. One of the many fringe benefits of this podcast and everything I do is when I actually get to meet folks face to face. So could not have been more thrilled, and I'm so appreciative of the California hospitality that Rafael showed me while I was on the West Coast. Please enjoy my conversation with Rafael Ventura, and I will see you all on the other side. Welcome to the show, Rafael. Why don't we start off by you telling us a little bit about yourself, perhaps highlighting some of those educational and or vocational milestones that you've had for folks who may wish to follow in your career footsteps. And welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Joe. Okay, so educational milestones. So I guess what I should say is that my educational pathway for your listeners may not be the best pathway to take, as I'm somebody that has some lived experience, has been system impacted himself, and luckily the system impact wasn't so grave that it barred me from being able to take this route and work in this field. A little bit about that. I think when I was, let's rewind here a little bit. As a young man, despite having a mother very supportive, I made a lot of mistakes as a young man, hung out with the wrong crowd, did a lot of bad things, and didn't really have an impact on me other than, it did have an impact on my schooling initially. Very small interactions with the law, nothing major about it at all. Somewhere around the time I was supposed to graduate from high school, I realized that a lot of the the activities that I was engaged in took me out of school and away from focusing on things that would help me graduate. And at some point, somebody said, hey, bud, you're probably not going to graduate. And that concept terrified me. And so I would say going into my senior year in high school, I became a very dedicated student and pretty much went to school from the zero period that we had here through night school to make up all the coursework that I missed to get the credits that I didn't have, and was eventually able to graduate with more credits than I was supposed to need. So one of the things that I was able to do was take a law enforcement class through a regional occupation program here in California that gave us the elective credits that I needed to graduate. And was not my first choice. Did not want to take a law enforcement class at all. They had a lot of different classes. They had travel, they had hairstylist, they had retail sales, they had there was the dog grooming. And I wanted to take every one other than law enforcement. And unfortunately, law enforcement was the only thing that was taking applicants. And so I reluctantly took it and was the biggest pain in the butt to those law enforcement professionals. They were all, the main professor was a retired LAPD. The others were local police officers actively working for their municipality. And I was this kind of thuggish kid that didn't really want to listen to them, that always had a smart aleck remark to say to them that they just always took with a grain of salt and hit me back with whatever I gave them or dished them, they gave it right back to me. and you know, they just stayed in step with me, and it just became kind of a thing. And one day, one of the professors said, you know, you're clearly not a follower. You have leadership qualities about you. And if you only applied those leadership qualities in a different way, that you could go very far.
Wow.
And it was kind of a nice conversation to have with this person. And it was the beginning of my change to move towards this kind of law enforcement career pathway. And I eventually, I think I took that class 4 times. And every time they had it structured like an academy. So, you know, the leaders sat at the one side of the classroom, and then you had your squad, and the lowest ranked person sat to the far left. And, you know, before towards the end of my second year, I was at the far right as the squad leader. And by the last class, I was sitting at the front of the class with the professors now teaching classes as the unit's captain. And I wish I could tell you that I jumped right into law enforcement and everything went well. That's not my story. My story is that I went to go work. I was doing really good work, and I ended up in some trouble at my employers. And as a young man at about 20, instead of following legal recourses that I could have had when they were messing with me at my work, I decided to steal from them. And I was busted. And, you know, I had become this honest guy that, yeah, okay, I'm busted. They said, well, you know, you've done really good work for us. If you just, you know, admit to everything and bring everything back, you know, we'll just wash this under the rug. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. And I did that. And that didn't happen. I'm in the office and I'm writing my letter of apology, and I heard the police in the hallway, the radio, and I knew I was going to go to jail, which I did. It was a brief stint, just a couple days at the police station where my teachers
Oh, man.
worked. They all came to visit me. They brought me food. They cried with me. It was a very sad moment in my life. But in the 90s, you get busted and things are different now. Now you can get convictions and still get work. In the 90s, you got a conviction and you're having a hard time getting work unless you're lying on every application. And I had a hard time getting work, and so I couldn't pay my fine. I couldn't pay my restitution. I essentially went into the courthouse. I have to tell you this. This is a part of the system that I now work in and try to change. But the case before me, I thought it was going to go really well for me. I walked in as a Latino judge. I'm thinking, okay, he's going to be maybe a little bit more Latino, a little bit more lenient with me because, we're from the same tribe, so to speak. And the guy in front of me was there on a DUI, didn't pass his field sobriety test, and had open containers in his car. And so, the judge goes through the procedurals and talks about what the evidence of the case is to the man. He says, how do you explain yourself? And the man says, well, Your Honor, I couldn't pass a field sobriety test today if you gave it to me. He says, I have bad knees, I have a bad back. I've been working in construction, labor intensive work all my whole life, so I couldn't do it right now even if you wanted me to. And he said, well, how do you explain the open containers in the car? He said, well, Your Honor, he says, I have these Mexicans that work for me. Oftentimes they have a couple drinks after work, and so they likely left the cans in the truck. And the judge said, oh, well, that makes sense. Case dismissed, which is fine. I'm thinking, that's great. This guy's very lenient. He's understanding. I'm up next.
Mm-hmm.
He says he reads my case description and asked me what I'm there for. And I said, Your Honor, I haven't been able to get a job yet. I'm still trying. I still have, rent I'm paying, a car that I'm trying to stay up on, my insurance. I haven't been able to pay in the last 2 months. I'm worried I'm going to lose my car and my house. And if I could just get a little bit more time, I know I've already had 2 extensions, but if I could do community service or, maybe a type of work release, where I can go in, do weekends and then something. If there's anything else you can do, he says, you don't have the money? I said, no. He said, 9 months county jail.
Ouch.
Yeah, ouch is right. That's how I felt at the time. I was shocked, scared, but also very aware that I made a mistake and that I needed to pay for my mistake. So wasn't completely shocked. And, he said, good time, good behavior, you'll be out in 4.5 months. I had every anticipation that I would get out in 4.5 months, which I did. But I did spend time in our county jail system. It was the worst experience of my entire life. And not so much the stay, just the process. The processing for me was the worst part of going through that experience. It was a almost 24-hour experience just to finally get a bed, to go to room, to have them rub their hands through their fingers through your hair, and the whole butt naked and search, and that whole degrading experience. And then you're in the room with homeless people that haven't showered in months, and the rooms keep getting smaller as you process from room to room, and to the point where it's almost claustrophobic. It was not the best time of my life. So I do have that experience. That is an educational experience, not the traditional kind. My high school experience was not the traditional type as well because I had to rush to complete everything inside of a year, all 3 of my years in 1 year. And so, I finished my time. I went to work in Hollywood, doing security, doing event management, working in restaurants and nightclubs and marketing companies and just all these different places where I could work to just to make a living. And at some point, some years later, I found myself going back to school. I think my first job was working in substance abuse treatment, and I wasn't. I think I was a purchase agent, and I did all the buying for 48 substance abuse treatment centers, and actually sat in a lot of their groups and appreciated a lot of the learning that I was able to obtain because they had a lot of in-service trainings. This particular agency had all these professionals coming from all over the place to offer different aspects of neuroscience and psychology and the drug substance abuse studies, and I just loved it and ended up getting certified as a substance abuse counselor, working with youth for a period of time. And then as I was about wrapping up my bachelor's degree, before I wrapped it up, I started working in a lot of different nonprofits, mostly around system impacted individuals, people coming out of jail, homeless individuals, foster care, just at a lot of different places. Oftentimes, most everybody that I work with had either been to jail, was coming out of jail, and some of the agencies I worked with actually gave me the opportunity to go into jail to offer classes. Eventually, I was teaching at the very facility that I was housed in when I was young, 20-year-old, locked up in the county jail. Moving forward in education, after my bachelor's degree, I went straight to get my master's. My bachelor's degree, consequently, was in social work. I got a special certification in nonprofit management and youth agency development. Then I went to get my master's in public admin because the amount of work that you do in government and around contracts and through nonprofits was important for me to understand and learn more about. So I got my master's from University of Laverne in public admin. My concentration in there was around nonprofit management and collaboration, and I quickly and immediately went into my doctorate program. My doctorate is in educational leadership. I got that from California State University in Los Angeles. Second cohort of that university's doctoral program. I graduated with the 6th cohort. It did take some time. It was a not entirely an easy task. When you're a working professional and you're trying to manage a family and move forward in your professional career, and you're doing your dissertation on a government agency. The IRB process is just daunting, and with a change in leadership in government means a change of perspective, means a change in having to rewrite your IRB proposal. And so, all these things, cause a delay in the game, so to speak. And it took a while and a lot more money than I anticipated.
It was a great investment,
It
though.
was. So, utilizing, my lived experience, both before and after incarceration, my experience working in Hollywood, doing security and event stuff, and I had a stint where I actually went to graphic design school for a while, as I was doing more marketing. And so, all these experiences combined, kind of have gone into where I'm at today. 10 years ago, I actually joined the probation department, mostly at the prodding of probation officers that I worked with that did good work in the community, that were amazing advocates for the people, that I was on committees with and attending meetings where they were always bugging me. Hey, you should apply to probation. Probation is evolving. Probation is changing. Probation needs people with your thinking, your ability, your strengths. And my answer was always, I'm good. It was very similar to the way I felt when I was a kid going into that law enforcement class. I did not initially want to engage in that way. And over time, they kept sending me the recruitment notices. Here you go, apply. Here you go.
They wore you down.
One day I said, oh, well, I'll apply and see what happens. And I got hired. And, now we are where we're at with things.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, I'm the programs and service coordinator for the new state legislative secure youth treatment program. A youth actually came up with the name for the Tri Academy, which is a transformative, restorative, and innovative academy. Part of this whole youth justice reimagined concept that the state and the counties, or LA County in particular, has come up with is that our program should be youth-centered. And so it's been my job to work with the youth to get them to help us drive the car.
Right.
So when they said we need a name outside of SYTF is the legislative term for this new, we need an actual name of our program. I had focus groups with the young men. We talked about what it meant to be part of this program, where we wanted to be with it, what conceptual framework they felt was important to frame in the name. And then we had a contest, and they all went, to their own spaces, and they worked together in groups, and they came up with different concepts and names, and they had a dictionary and the thesaurus, and they were working hard at trying to come up with it. And then they brought them back to me. We looked at them all, had a discussion about, probably the 8 of them that they came up with, narrowed it down to, I think, 4 collectively. And then I submitted those names to the department. The department decided it wanted to create a poll with the 4 names and issue it to everybody that works with the youth to see what their thoughts were. And then I reminded them that it was youth-centered and that we needed to focus on what the young men say. And they redid the poll, and they allowed the youth to participate in the voting. Now, I think another one among the staff won the polling, but this name, the Tri Academy, was selected by the young people, and the department ultimately decided to choose what the kids said. And that's where we got Tri Academy from. So now Tri-Academy is the Tri-Academy SYTF facilities. So we have the large one, which is at Sylmar Juvenile Hall, and then the small camp setting, which is at Campus Kilpatrick in Malibu.
When you were speaking, Rafael, an amazing story, by the way, thank you for sharing, but it reminded me of a term from criminology. You're likely familiar with it, but when they examine an individual's criminal trajectory, they tend to break it down into two different populations. There's the adolescent limited who dabble in delinquency and sort of self-correct. And then, of course, on the other end of the spectrum, there's the life course persistent. And those are the folks that you've likely sent up to Pelican Bay and whatnot. And glad to see you fell into that adolescent limited camp and self-corrected along the way. But it's a good illustration that, again, folks make mistakes and they turn their lives around, and we shouldn't label and make all these decisions about where that individual is on the track to go. You mentioned, of course, with your educational accomplishments, you secured your PhD. I know you do a little bit of adjunct faculty work, as do I. I teach a variety of courses on corrections, probation, parole, evidence-based practices. Have you found that in your role as a faculty member, I at least have found that it helps keep me abreast of the latest and greatest trends, because I can't allow my syllabus to get stale or have my students challenge me on, this is outdated, professor. Does that resonate what I'm saying? That it kind of keeps you on your toes, that you're responsible for delivering the latest content, so you yourself have to self-educate along the way.
I do think that it does help a lot. However, I'll say this. I haven't been afforded the opportunity to teach since COVID. I was teaching a lot just prior, and then COVID hit, and I watched my my classes drop one by one, and then I didn't have any. Is that a terrible thing? It's not terrible. I miss it. I miss the classroom, and you're right. I do think that, that kind of classroom engagement is helpful to the work that you're doing in a facility, especially in teaching staff and teaching the youth. But I also think that the experience that you gain working as a practitioner, gives a tremendous amount of content for when you're teaching in the classroom. I do miss that. The last classes that I was teaching was at a small college here in California, Pacific Oaks. There was a human development program with a special emphasis in what do they call it? Social justice and advocacy. Loved the program. But what it meant is that I was teaching people that were coming into the field with preconceived notions in the same type of preconceived notions that I had as a high school kid going into law enforcement class, as a community-based organization worker, balking at every, job posting that was sent to me. That they're coming in with this kind of preconceived notion about what it means to be a probation officer or work in law enforcement in general. Abolitionist thought is a thing. It's a very real thing, and it's something that we're faced with. It's not just a couple advocacy groups. It's a social movement. And so, this program gave me an opportunity to work with these folks to show a different side of what it means to be, to do probation work. And oftentimes they left with a different perception. Some of them still, carry that whole whatever that they had an abolitionist thinking when they came in, and they left to a certain degree with it. But they did become more aware of the fact that there are a lot of good law enforcement officers out there that want to provide services, that want to be a service, or they want to benefit the community in some way, shape, or form. And I felt that was an important element to their learning.
You mentioned that if nothing else, some of those students walked away with a better awareness of law enforcement, of criminal justice. Let's switch gears a little bit. I'm going to circle back to that notion in a moment here, but you and I are both members of APPA, the American Probation and Parole Association. And specifically, we are part of a working group of influencers, which have gotten together to strategize about and discuss how we can use our various social media platforms to be ambassadors, if you will, for APPA. So again, along the lines of giving people a better awareness of corrections and probation and parole, I think that's one of our initiatives. Share some of your experiences with that endeavor, and or talk about your own social media presence.
I'm going to say maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I think I was just kind of watching other people on social media, highlight, what they do, what they aspire to do, just becoming more present. The platform just creates more awareness in general on the things that I was watching on social media. And I started thinking about what that looks like for us in our, I see a lot of the social justice advocacy groups doing it. And while I'm a probation officer and a professor, I do fancy myself as still a social justice advocate, a reformist. I do still see myself in that light. And so for me, mostly via Facebook, and then little by little, it became Instagram, and now I'm starting to contemplate the world of TikTok. I'm going to say this. I think my son also is a test subject of my social media presence. As my son plays water polo in the Division I high school, and as he was getting ready to go off to college, having a social media presence or to highlight his accomplishments in the sport. I started managing a page for him, and as I was doing his page and becoming more comfortable with understanding how to use social media, I started to embrace it myself in my own professional experience or professional endeavors, I should say. And so, that's kind of where I'm at with things. We have some other people in our group, in our work group, that are amazing. You being one of them. There's messaging out there. Most of what I did initially was I felt that we needed to do a better job locally at working with our advocacy groups and our partner agencies. And that includes our intergovernmental partner groups. And so, I would highlight events, I'd highlight needs, I'd highlight a specific youth and his dreams and goals. And what I ended up finding was that there were people out there that were interested in helping somebody with that specific need, or helping us with a specific goal, or helping another organization achieve something. So, initially, I think I don't know how many thousands and thousands of dollars I've been able to gain in donations, suits and sports equipment and games. And there's a lot of things that, running shoes. We had a track team. I had a swim team. I done taught the guys to play my son's sport, water polo, and all the help we were able to get from somebody in the community, a group or a group of people or an individual. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect is that, granting agencies, want to see what what you're doing, what you're able to accomplish with the revenue that they give you. How are you spending it? How are they benefit? How do they get to look good in the public's eye for granting this particular agency? So, I mean, all the way around, it's been beneficial for me as a practitioner, but it has such a larger and broader application that I haven't even been able to tap into yet.
Years ago, I used to teach an undergraduate course. It was all about criminal justice in the media. And I found a really nice textbook, actually, that examined how, and I'm not talking about the media as in the 10 o'clock news. Well, that was part of it. But also even, you've been mentioning Hollywood, how various criminal justice vocations are portrayed in the media, which, for better or worse, is how most people form a reality or perception of that. And when I was putting the course together, it dawned on me that corrections is highlighted in the movies, whether it's The Shawshank Redemption or Escape from Alcatraz, but there's really no portrayal, certainly not an accurate portrayal of just the day-to-day life of a probation and parole officer in the media. So I think part of what we're doing with this influencer group as well, what you're doing as well, is just learning to be better ambassadors and better PR for the vocation and leverage that media as you're doing to benefit those we serve, our stakeholders, and really get a better understanding in the public's eye and even in the policymakers' eyes of what probation and parole is all about. And as you mentioned, we've got a great team in that working group, up to and including Brittany Jackson, who has her own podcast. She co-hosts called Two Hyatt's Podcast. She also has an incredible Instagram following, My Favorite PO. So I'll try to remember to leave links for Brittany's work in your feeds as well, Rafael, in the description of this podcast, so folks can start following your great work. I was recently in Los Angeles. We got a chance to meet face to face. It was awesome. Thank you for that opportunity. I learned all about California's correctional approaches. We toured 2 juvenile facilities. You mentioned the Sylmar facility. We also went to Campus Kilpatrick. Maybe give folks just a real 10,000-foot view, rather, of what that philosophy you have out there in Los Angeles is all about, and share for the folks some of the great things that I saw when I was touring those 2 facilities.
So before I get into, the whole theoretical concept of what we call the alley model, I want to rewind a little bit and talk a little bit more about the adolescent limited and the life course persistent. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit more about that because, one of the things that I failed to mention about SB 823 is that a big part of that is that we are no longer in the state of California trying to convict young people of life term long sentences. Like, in California, the maximum a life sentence, juvenile life right now is 7 years. That's the max. The whole concept of that is that we want them to, we hope, I should say, that they're going to age out of their delinquency, of their whatever criminality that or criminal conviction they may have had. Most of these guys that are in the Tri Academy are what we call in California 707B offenders, which are the highest risk offenders. They could be attempted murderers, rapists, home invasions, any kind of violent crime. They have been more likely convicted of. Does that mean that they're washouts, that they're not capable of change, that they're throwaway youth? Not by any means. The idea is that we have a youth-centered, trauma-informed, highly therapeutic, program-intensive program in place that helps these guys develop and change and restore themselves to a certain degree. So we work with credible messengers in our model. We also have victims of crime that come with the credible messengers to talk to our young people about forgiveness and it's a very restorative approach. We've had some amazing experiences with these type of healing circles that we do in our program. I'll give you one example. We had two men come in to offer their experiences with healing and forgiveness. And so the one man had come in. He was a victim. His brother was killed, so he was a survivor of that experience. Brother was killed. He was beaten, left for dead, robbed, and left for dead. He said that experience put him on a different trajectory in life, and he ended up becoming, kind of what his brother was not perfect. He was actually involved in gangs and was doing criminal acts. He wasn't that day that he was killed, but essentially he was in the neighborhood, wrong place, wrong time. He was killed. This man, not having an ability or an understanding of how to deal with his grief, ended up following in that same pathway. His younger brother, and ended up in prison. While he was in prison, at some point he got wind of that the man that had killed his brother wanted to make amends to him.
Oh, wow.
And he wasn't open to it at all. So the man that killed his brother started writing letters, asking to meet, asking if he would be willing to talk to him, asking for forgiveness. And he was not open to it for years. And one day when he was in prison, the warden came to him and said, "Hey, there's this guy. I keep getting these letters from this guy that wants to make amends with you. Would you be willing to have a conversation with him?" And he said, "No, I don't." And so he said, "Well, can we talk about it a little bit more?" And so the warden and this man talked for some time and eventually got him to the point where he was willing to, he got the letters, never read them, left them sealed, just kept them. And after conversation with the warden and whatever clinical team that was in that particular prison, he eventually opened the letters and started to read through them. Then he became intrigued. Then he wanted to talk to him. So he told the warden that he would meet. Then I think something happened where they got moved and that whole thing fell apart. So this man and another man that's wait his turn to tell his experience, pauses in the story for a second. The young men that are in the healing circle asked, "Hey, did you ever talk to this man?" They're also saying things like, "I would never, if I ran into that person, I would," all retaliatory, all retribution type thinking, all their inability to forgive the next man for something, but they paused and asked that question, "Did you ever talk to him?" And the man said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, what did he say?" And they're in the process, they're saying, "What did he say? That he's that piece of this, and he's a worst person in the world," and they're making all kinds of judgments on him. And the guy says, "Why don't you ask him?" He's next to him. They're doing the healing circle together. So the young men were just floored. They just couldn't. They couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
They couldn't fathom that they were in the same space together, you know. And there was a deep conversation. You know, it was a very emotional time for a lot of them. You know, the man said, I still have a hard time looking at his hands sometimes. Yes, we're friends now. Yes, we go to breakfast. Yes, we speak all around the country together. Yes, we occasionally I look at his hands and I can't stop from thinking about that. Those are the hands that killed my brother, you know. And he said, the one thing that I appreciate about this other man is that he can tell him those things, and that the man never is defensive. He validates those feelings and understands those feelings, and doesn't, it allows them to stay friends. So the young men in our program were just completely taken back by that experience. And that's just one. We've had several similar experiences, where we have had a victim come in, or a victim's mother, or, just to share with the kids. And I do think that it helps. And one of the other parts of the program is that they do journaling. And the one journal, the victim awareness journal, these type of encounters, these experiences that we provide for them in this program, really kind of help them with getting a better or more real understanding of what a victim impact statement looks like. You can give them a handbook, but if you don't give them an experience or something to cling to, it's not going to be that tangible. And we've been able to do that fairly well in this program. So it's developmental, it's youth centered, it's restorative, and it's probably one of the best programs I've ever worked in my life. The successes that we're seeing in this program are amazing. As the program grows, I'm sure we'll have some folks that are more life course persistent. Yeah, but because it's a developmental approach, these guys go through different stages. So, they start at a stage, and as their behavior starts to change, as they start to progress, their understanding starts to progress, they move from unit to unit, and they get different programmatic experiences that help them get to where we went eventually, which was Kilpatrick. There, they get even more support. And the other thing that's a part of our program is that it's a village, right? We always talk about it takes a village to raise a child. This has been generations. This is an old proverb. Actualizing what it takes to raise a child in a village is a whole other concept, especially inside of an institution. And I think that is a big part of the success model that we've experienced, because we do engage all of our partners. We do. That's inter and intra governmental agencies, our advocacy groups, our community-based organizations provide our faith-based groups, our policymakers. Like, we incorporate everybody to be part of the village. And I think that, I'll tell you this, when I was writing my dissertation on another county educational program, one of the quotes from the leader from that educational program was, he brings in all these dignitaries from all over. They bring in celebrities, they bring in politicians, they bring in, CEOs from corporations. And he was adamant about the fact that when you bring in these type of people to honor for them, it was the student inmates, that it goes a long way. It makes them feel more important, more special. And then those special impacts, were deep and more motivating. And so I always kind of take that experience and that quote from my dissertation and put it into practice in our own program. And so we do have a monthly village meeting that everybody comes together on. We talk about, challenge. We're doing strategic planning,
Right.
without calling it a strategic plan. It's what can we do better? Where are we lacking? Who can fill that gap? If we have somebody going home, how are we going to support him? It's not the the probation systems of old where somebody's about to leave, you give them a piece of paper, you say, hey, these are the resources that you need. You should call these people. You should look at this one. You should go here and check in with your PO and make sure he follows this plan. And then they go home. They don't do any of it.
Right.
It's very different in that, we establish a plan together as a village, and then it's the credible messengers. It's some of our CBOs that actually are there, that pick the kid up, that take them to the next place, that before they go there, they go to dinner and have a nice meal, or they take them to the beach. And oftentimes we're there, as part of that process, so that the young people see that we are all on the same page, trying to work to their benefit, to help them move to the next level, right? So that whole feeling supported by the whole village is, I think, a lot of where the success comes from. And you want to hear about the successes?
I do. Yeah. And you've been mentioning, saying that it takes a village. And I shouldn't say only, but I spent a day in those facilities, and that was the vibe I got. It was just a real, almost communal sense, which is what you want in a facility. I know I mentioned this to you when we were touring and walking around, that I'd been doing some training recently over in the Middle East with their prison officials over there, but we were trying to get them to adopt the Norway model, which is really all about dynamic security, which is really all about relationship-based security, which is what you have there. Yeah, it boils down to that in a lot of ways, not necessarily whatever off-the-shelf program or off-the-shelf intervention, but it's the relationship that staff have with those youth. And that just came across so strong in the day I spent with you, Rafael, which, again, you noted we ended up in Malibu, which is where the kids sort of level up when they go through the various stages. So keep talking about the great work there, Campus Kilpatrick, and then I'm not going to let you leave here without telling about the Hollywood tie-in to Campus Kilpatrick, which I'm sure many of our listeners will appreciate as well.
Well, let's get that out of the way.
Okay.
So Kilpatrick is the home of the film The Gridiron Gang, which is based on a true story. It was that football model program. It was a great program as well. I do believe that from that program, we had some guys go off to college, and we had some guys touch down in so to speak, in the NFL. Maybe briefly. I don't know the extent, but the movie was filmed on that site. Though the site is completely different looking, outside of the swimming pool. The entire facility has been remodeled to become more of this campus like Kilpatrick that you visited.
Right.
The old camp. Well, if you want to see it, watch the film.
There you go. A good plug for the film. I'm sure Dwayne Johnson appreciates our plug. But yeah, continue. I didn't mean to knock you off your square there, Rafael.
That's okay. Successes. I do want to talk about successes. We have it's hard to gather the numbers now because we've had an increasing number, but I would say from the first 12 youth that left our program, we had one recidivate. It was a minor. It was super minor. I just think he failed to report, and he got flashed, and he went back out. But he's working still. He's raising his daughter. So I wouldn't call that a complete non-success story. The fact that he's maintaining employment and is still a big thing. But
Yeah,
we
huge.
have some other folks that haven't recidivated. I don't think any of the other did the first 12. We've got guys working right now a paid internship through NBC. I have a guy that finished our dog training program, is doing a different dog training program while he's out now because he's in the community. This young man volunteers at the Parks and Rec, where people go and abandon dogs to help train the dogs that the Parks and Rec keeps there on site and then tries to home them after he's trained them. He was going to a university in the Pacific Northwest. He was doing that before he left us, continued after leaving us, and is now going to be transferring to a local Cal State, one of our local Cal State systems. But he's also, continuing to dog train, and he has a social media presence. He's always showing his work on social media, and once he's off of probation, I can get him to come on the show and talk about his experience. He actually was a panelist at APPA in Los Angeles. Great speaker. Had people from all over the country, asking him to come. They'd pay him a stipend to come out and speak at their facilities once he got off of probation. I mean, tropical places, Alaska, just all these different places. He's a very dynamic speaker, and he's going places in life, and we're really proud of him. We got another guy that called me the other day, told me that he wanted to cry. And I said, "Why do you want to cry?" He said, "Well, I don't know what to do." And I said, "What do you mean you don't want to know what to do?" He says, I got into UC Santa Cruz. I got into UC San Diego. I got into UC Santa Barbara. And I got into Cal. He says, "I've narrowed it down to Santa Barbara and Cal, but I don't know what to do." He says, I'm almost in tears. And I said, these are great problems to have.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good problem
he says,
to have.
I know, but he says, what do you think I should do? And I said, I asked him, when have I ever told you what I think that you need to do? He says, "You haven't." I said, "No." I said, I will walk you through your options. I will help you process your thinking and what you think is best for you, but I'm not going to make the decision for you. And he says, "You're not going to be mad if I don't go to Cal?" I said, "No. Santa Barbara is a great option. You could do either. Santa Cruz would be great." I said, I'd like to go get you to go meet Angela Davis up there. And
right.
he thought about that for a second. He said, "No, I still want to go to Santa Barbara, Cal." And I said, "Okay." I said, that's fine. What we talked it through different things, and then I saw him on the news.
Uh-oh.
He was on the news talking about justice reform and advocacy. And he was sharing his experience with the system. And then at the very end of the news, they called him out by name and said that he's going to be going to Cal. And I thought, oh, did they get that right? Or did he or because I had talked to him the day before and he hadn't decided. So I'm going to say shortly afterwards, he sent me the clip of his news. And then I said, I saw it. And he said, well, what do you think? And I said, I think you were nervous. And he said, I was a little bit. And I said, that's okay. I think you're going to get better. He's also very well spoken. I mean, obviously, if you're going to get into these prestigious universities, there's he's got qualities that want and that are going to serve him well in life. And he said, I said, did you decide? And he said, yeah, I decided I'm going to go to Cal. And I said, what were the deciding factors? What made you decide that Cal was the best? He said, honestly, he said something you said. And I said, oh, no, don't put it on me. That you asked me what caliber of people do I want to be with on a daily basis? And I said, yeah, I asked you that. And he said, and I think that even though there's going to be a lot of great people at Santa Barbara, they called UCSB the University of Casual Sex and Beer. He said, and they call it that for a reason. And I know that there's drinking at Cal. I know guys, there's fraternities and people get wild at any college or institution. He said, but at the end of the day, he says, I know Cal is more cutthroat and will drive me to be a better person than I can be because it's so cutthroat. And so I've decided that I'd rather challenge myself to move to the next level. And this is that whole concept of giving these guys the opportunity to develop and to give them the support that they need to find that personal development within themselves that I don't think we've done historically well. And he and some of these other guys are testament to the changes that we are now starting to employ in our systems. And again, it's exciting to be a part of it.
I'm a big data guy. I believe in empirical evidence over anecdotal evidence, but I can tell you, Rafael, just the couple 2-3 hours that I toured Kilpatrick and got to meet all those young men and just the caliber of their character, you could just tell that this program was something special, and the vibe there was really unique to many of the correctional facilities that I've toured in my career. So kudos to you and your team and all the great work you do, and more to the point, just the philosophy and what you bring to the table, which again, those relationships are so much more impactful over any off-the-shelf intervention or program model. So we have our big APPA Training Institute coming up in August in New York City. Looking forward to seeing you there and any other listeners. For those who may not be members of APPA, give us your elevator speech, Rafael, as to all the great benefits of joining that professional organization, and or if they are members, why they should join you and I in New York City this August.
Well, first and foremost, I have to say that we're going to be there.
Say no more. That's your mic drop moment right there. Well, we're going to be there.
But no, there's APPA has a lot of great presenters and does a great job highlighting. I'm going to say the future of our profession. I think it's an important organization to be a part of because sometimes we, when we're in the weeds, forget what our ultimate job is. The whole dynamic between us being in law enforcement and us providing a social service. And I think APPA does a good job of finding the balance between, what it means to be a social service provider and a law enforcement entity. So I do think that's the other thing is it's New York. I mean, the Big Apple, the Rockettes.
Broadway's right there.
Good good pizza.
Yes, all of the above.
You know, and we're going to be right there at the Marriott Marquis, right across the way from everything. It's going to be amazing. I know you're going to be giving a couple presentations, as will I. We'll be doing a panel together, I believe, that we're working on. So, yeah, come, sign up. It's not too late to try to win the paid. What are they giving away again? Help me remember.
They're giving away a free trip to New York. I'm going to track down the information and leave a link for said contest in the description of this episode. I know I've received stuff and I've shared on my LinkedIn page, but I'll share it here with the audience as well that yes, you could win a free trip to New York City to join Rafael and I and the rest of the APPA community in the Big Apple. Rafael, I'm going to have you back on the program, and when you join me, maybe you can bring your graduate out here to be an ambassador for all the great work you're doing.
Yeah, I think my panel may have him present because just discharged probation.
Perfect.
And some my panel will be on collaboration and the whole village-like approach that we employ. And so some of the village members will be there to talk about the strengths and benefits of employing a village-like approach inside of an institution.
Okay, my friend, thank you so much. We will see you next time. And again, check the description of this episode for a lot of valuable links regarding some of the topics that Rafael and I discussed today. Until next time, Rafael, be well.
Thank you very much, Joe, for having me. I'll see you soon.
A major criminologist podcast. Thank you to Dr. Rafael Ventura, joining us from sunny California to talk all about the great work that they're doing out there with Los Angeles County Probation and his mission as a social justice warrior. Rafael, looking forward to see you in New York City this coming August of 2023. As promised, I have left a link in the episode description of this podcast for how listeners can win a free trip to New York City to attend the APPA Training Institute the last week in August of 2023. Also, I've left links for information on the aforementioned Campus Kilpatrick and the LA model. I've also left links for some of Rafael's social media, his Instagram feed, as well as his Facebook page. Please check those out. We'll be back next week with a fresh episode. In the meantime, you may contact the show or reach out to us through our website, the Paragon Group, LLC.com, for training or presentations as to core correctional skills, program design, or, of course, the topic of desistance from crime. If you have questions or comments as to this podcast, feel free to contact the show via our email at thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. That's thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. Remember to follow us through our Facebook and Instagram pages at The Criminologist Podcast. New fun images are being added all the time to those feeds. You don't want to miss out. The Criminologist Media Group is also on Twitter. Give us a follow at Crim Media Group. That's CRIM Media Group. You may also connect with me, Joseph Arvidsson, or Rafael Ventura on LinkedIn, and follow both the Criminologist Podcast and the Paragon Group on our LinkedIn pages. Hey, lastly, if you've not already done so, check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Criminologist, for additional content as to the themes of this podcast. And if you believe in what we're doing on the show, if you're part of the movement, please spread the word, tell a friend or a coworker or a colleague about us. Ask them to subscribe to the podcast, and of course, do so yourself if you've not already done so. And always remember, folks, there's no them, there's only us.
You're clearly not a follower. You have leadership qualities about you. And if you only applied those leadership qualities in a different way, that you could go very far.
The Criminologist podcast is a production of the Paragon Group, LLC. For speaking engagements, interviews, program design, or training opportunities, please visit us at theparagongroup.llc.com. If you enjoyed the show, you can find more content and videos on our YouTube channel, The Criminologist. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Both the Criminologist podcast and the Criminologist channel are brought to you by the Criminologist Media Group. Be sure to give us a 5-star review, and thanks for listening.